Hello there, my name is Christie. I work with Nancy Rourke. Hi there, I'm Nancy Rourke. I'm an artist and a painter. I've painted all of the portraits in the book, including the cover. We have developed materials for deaf children to learn about deaf history. We're going to explain about how we've developed the book, what the inside of the book looks like, and some different materials or activities that you can use as a teacher. Let's start out with how and why we developed the book. As I'm sure you know, it's important to teach deaf children about their history, about people who, like them, were deaf. There's a deaf woman researcher, Yvonne Pitois, from France, who in the 1920s said that you teach American children American history, and we teach French children French history, but that means that we need to teach deaf children, no matter where they're from, no matter which country they live in, deaf history. She said that in 1920, and yet here we are today. Another person, Harlan Lane, who you may be familiar with, said that schools have never really taught deaf history, because if we were to teach deaf history, that would mean that we would have to recognize deaf culture. We agree that we want to support the teaching of deaf history, and so we've created resources for that. We've done this not only for deaf children, but also for deaf adults and the deaf community at large. In order to create the book, we needed some money. We made the decision to start a Kickstarter campaign. If you're not familiar with that, it's the same idea as GoFundMe. You ask people from your community to give money into a fund. We weren't very easy with the idea of asking for money, but it was really great, and we got a lot of positive support. People joined in on our community effort. The book is titled ABC Portraits of Deaf Ancestors. We've followed the last names of famous people in deaf history through the alphabet. A for Adams, B for Ballard, C for Clark, and so on. One thing that was really difficult for us was trying to find a name to match a particular letter. And many would think that we would have difficulty finding somebody with the last name that started with Z. But we found somebody. Then they would think U. Well, no, we found somebody with the last name that started with U. It was the letter X that really got us stuck. And that's true for many ABC books. X is always a challenge. So we decided to do something different. We wanted to recognize the unknown. So we've created a page for unknown ancestors taking the place of X. We want to recognize that people have been left out of our history, that there were people who are influential for our community that we don't know about. It could be deaf women, deaf people with other disabilities, deaf blind people, deaf immigrants, deaf people of color who haven't appeared in our history narratives. We don't know what may have happened in their lives, even though those things might have been amazing, but we can't tell their stories. We also know that some deaf people never have gone to school or never have learned sign language or have gone to college. But those people are still valuable to our community and to our history, even though we may not know about them. So the X represents all of these people in their entirety, and we've paid homage to them in our book. We've still made a portrait on the X page, just as we did on all the other letter pages. Plus, we've written a small bio. In the case of X, I'll ask Nancy to describe how it was that she developed that portrait and the challenges she faced. The letter X was the hardest of all of the portraits that I had to paint. The unknown contribution, right? Not being able to find somebody with an X last name and deciding to recognize our unknown contributions in the community. I thought about Alice Cogswell, for example, the deaf girl from American School for the Deaf, and her profile. I thought that would be close to what we might want to include, but that we also needed to include profiles of people of other backgrounds, different races, different ages, and have a mix of these unknowns. So that's where I ended up, starting from this idea of putting the profile of Alice in the portrait. The American School for the Deaf is proud to sponsor the National Deaf Education Conference, which has created the NDEC Signs and NDEC Engage series this year. During the pandemic, we need to be creative and thoughtful about how we reach our communities, and NDEC has done that for our instructors, administrators, and parents. Thank you. I'm now going to explain 3 other profiles that we've added in the book. For the letter R, we've included someone with the last name of Redden. You may be familiar with them. This is a woman by the name of Laura Redden. Laura graduated from the Missouri School for the Deaf. During high school, she started writing and sending her work to local newspapers in St. Louis. But she did not use her own name. She used another name, which was Howard Glendon, a man's name, in order to obscure the fact that she was a woman, thinking that as a woman, she would have a harder time getting published. Later on, she went to Washington, D.C. during the Civil War era. She happened to get the chance to interview President Lincoln. And she did that through written word. She ended up sending her article to St. Louis to be published. So she has quite a fascinating story. She later became very interested in English poetry, and she wrote about people in American government roles. For these books, she used another name, potentially thinking that she wouldn't be able to sign a contract. She was briefly married and took the last name of Searing, and so she would alternate between Laura Searing, Laura Redden, and Howard Glendon for her writing. Now Nancy will describe the portrait she made. This is Laura Redden. I tried to look at 2 different books to find her signature, to see what it should look like. I did find out that she really loved dressing up. She loved wearing jewelry, and her hair was always in a bun. So from those pictures, I gleaned a lot of details as to what she may have looked like. Because of this, I decided to add a lot of color in the painting I did of her. Next up, I for Ingram. This is a man by the name of Monroe Ingram. Mr. Ingram was from Kansas. He was an African-American man, deaf, and a semi-pro baseball player. When he graduated from the Kansas School for the Deaf, he went to teach in Oklahoma at the School for Deaf African-American Children. During the summer, he went back home to Kansas and would play baseball. He did this for several years. Baseball players at the time would, if you read history about him, you would see that he came up several times as being a very good pitcher. In this portrait, I've included his glove and the letter E, and you can see that I really enjoy painting people of color. This is from an old photo of himself. The photo of Monroe Ingram is hard to see. It's black and white, it's a little bit blurry, and it has faded. So I tried my best to capture his likeness. At that time, he was playing baseball, and I had to look up what gloves look like in that era, what balls look like in that era, and what the uniforms may have looked like. They didn't have buttons on the uniforms, they had those X's that you see. And the E that I've put on the uniform represents where he was playing. That brings us to our third person. W stands for Wilkins, a woman named Blanche Wilkins. Blanche Wilkins was an African-American deaf woman, the first to graduate from the Minnesota School for the Deaf. She wanted to enroll at Gallaudet University, but at that time, in the 1890s, Gallaudet was not accepting black students. She decided then to move to North Carolina. She taught at the North Carolina School for Black Deaf Students and was the first deaf woman teacher at that school. She taught for several years and eventually moved to Texas School for the Deaf. This was the specific school in Texas for Black, deaf, and deafblind children. One time she went home to Minnesota over a summer and participated in the NAD conference. She was actually nominated to be on the executive committee at that conference. A Black, deaf woman on the NAD executive committee at that time was astonishing. It wasn't until 1965 or thereabouts that NAD permitted deaf Black people to vote and deaf women to vote. One add-on to this story is that recently at the Minnesota School for the Deaf, they have inaugurated a new dorm in the name of Blanche Wilkins. The portrait I've painted of her was really enjoyable. As I mentioned before, I enjoy painting people of color, and there are several reasons for that. One reason is that their skin color shows many different shades: darkness, lightness, expression, and emotion, especially in the eyes, in the hair. Let me show you what I mean with the portrait of Blanche Wilkins. Look at her eyes. They're fascinating. The hair as well, lots of shades in the hair, lightness, darkness coming through. Here we're showing you some other materials or activities that teachers can use. If you get the book for your classroom, you may also want to get the coloring book version. We also have a large poster. This contains all of the portraits of our deaf ancestors on it, from A to Z. Your students can point to different portraits and tell you who each of them is as a learning experiment. As far as activities go, you could create a Jeopardy type game, or you could make your own poster for the classroom. Kids may get a book, copy some pages, A to Z, with the pictures and the names, and then match them up. The letter, the picture, and the name. You may even want to add the biographical information. If you'd like more information, please check out the website. Certis United is a nonprofit organization in solidarity. They've been putting a lot of effort into supporting this book, the ABC Portraits of Deaf Ancestors, and DeVia curricula for our children. Thank you.